I've always considered myself a trusting person. My wife, Emily, has never given me a reason to doubt her. But that night, as I scrolled through our shared Amazon account, my heart stilled. The notification caught my eye, a recent purchase she had made, a hotel reservation. It was for the following weekend, a date she hadn't mentioned to me. The description was simple, just a confirmation number and the name of a hotel I didn't recognize. My mind started to spin, and a pit formed in my stomach. It was a harmless oversight, right? Just a mix-up. She had a busy work schedule, maybe this was something for one of her colleagues or a project she hadn't told me about. I tried to convince myself of that as I stared at the screen, my thumb scrolling aimlessly over the details. But there was something in the back of my mind, something I couldn't quite shake off. Emily had been distant recently, but I chalked it up to stress. Work had been demanding, and we hadn't spent much time together. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel the hairs on the back of my neck rise. There was no note about the purchase, no explanation. I knew she would have told me if she'd made plans, right? Maybe it wasn't anything. But why didn't she tell me about it? Why was she so careful not to mention it? I didn't say anything to her that night. I didn't confront her. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I found myself Googling the hotel's name, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed. The search results were clear, it wasn't a 5-star resort or some luxurious getaway spot. It was a modest hotel, the kind you book when you want a place to sleep for a night and nothing more. The reviews weren't terrible, but they were nothing impressive either. Clean enough, one review read. Basic amenities, said another. But what bothered me more than the hotel itself was that Emily had never mentioned it. It wasn't like her to keep things from me, at least not like this. It was a gut feeling that I couldn't ignore, an uncomfortable, nagging thought that had begun to fester. Something was off. I tried to shake it off, but the more I thought about it, the less I could let it go. I knew what I had to do. I had to find out for myself. But how? How could I approach this without looking paranoid, without overreacting? By lunchtime, the decision had been made. I was going to the hotel. I didn't want to believe that there was something to worry about, but I couldn't keep wondering. I needed answers. Maybe I was just being insecure, maybe it was nothing at all. But I couldn't ignore the way my heart raced at the thought of her being there, alone. I told myself that it would be fine. I would go, confirm my suspicions, and if everything was as innocent as I hoped, I would go home and forget about it. But the truth was, I didn't think it would be fine. There was a part of me, deep down, that feared I was about to uncover something that would change everything. The drive to the hotel was agonizingly slow. I kept replaying the scenario in my head, imagining how I'd confront her if she was there, why she hadn't told me, why this felt so wrong. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe it wasn't even her there at all. But with every mile that passed, that hope became harder to cling to. I pulled into the parking lot of the hotel and parked in the far corner. From here, I could see the lobby entrance, the cars parked outside, the small sign hanging above the door. The hotel looked just as unremarkable as the website had shown. But the idea of Emily being here, alone, made the place feel like 1,000 miles away from ordinary. I sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to calm my racing heart, trying to convince myself this was all in my head. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt the pressure building in my chest. I couldn't leave without knowing. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever I might uncover, but it was too late to turn back. I opened the door and stepped out, my shoes clicking against the pavement, each step sounding louder than the last. The air was heavy, thick with tension, and I couldn't tell if I was walking toward the truth or stumbling into a nightmare. The lobby smelled like cheap coffee and disinfectant. It was nothing fancy, nothing that would give me any clue that something more than an ordinary check-in was happening. I approached the front desk, my heart pounding in my ears. The receptionist, a young woman with short brown hair, glanced up at me. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but indifferent. I hesitated for a second before speaking. "I'm looking for someone who checked in here," I said, my voice more steady than I expected. "A woman named Emily McCarthy. She was supposed to check in today." The receptionist typed something into her computer, her fingers moving fast, the tapping of the keys like thunder in my mind. She didn't look up as she worked, but I could feel her eyes scanning the screen, then pausing, then moving again. Finally, she looked at me, her brow furrowing. "Yes," she said, slowly. "She checked in earlier today. Room 204. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't expected it to be that easy. I hadn't expected confirmation. But there it was. "Thanks," I muttered, turning quickly and walking toward the stairs. I could feel my palms starting to sweat, my stomach tightening with every step. What was I supposed to do now? Walk in and confront her? Yell? Ask questions I wasn't ready for? I reached the second floor and walked down the hall, every step feeling heavier than the last. Room 204. The number was a beacon, leading me closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I stood in front of the door, the keycard in my pocket like a ticking time bomb. I could hear voices muffled from inside, 2 voices, both low and indistinguishable. My heart pounded as I stared at the door, my hand gripping the card tighter. I wanted to knock, to burst in, but I didn't know what I was going to say, what I was going to see. Part of me wanted to walk away, to forget this whole thing. But I couldn't. This wasn't just about the hotel room or the purchase or the lingering suspicions. It was about trust. And mine had just been shattered. I took a deep breath and slid the card into the slot. The door clicked open. My heart slammed against my chest as I stepped inside, the quiet air feeling thicker than it should. The first thing I noticed was how immaculate the room was, pristine, almost clinical. The bed was made, the lamps were dimmed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only noise, and it felt deafening in the stillness. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't this. I took another step inside, my shoes barely making a sound on the carpet. My mind raced with thoughts, over 100 scenarios played out in my head, each one more explosive than the last. But none of them involved nothing. There was no loud confrontation. No one hiding in the bathroom. No frantic attempts to cover up a mistake. The room was just empty. I glanced around quickly, my breath shaky. I was half relieved and half pissed. Where was Emily? I had no idea what I was doing here, standing in a hotel room that wasn't even mine, searching for answers that might not exist. I was almost afraid to move, afraid that if I did, I'd break the fragile calm that hung in the air. The longer I stood there, the more the room seemed to mock me. I came looking for answers, but all I found was a feeling of growing confusion. I took a few more steps inside. I looked at the bed again, no signs of someone having been there recently. Then my eyes shifted to the desk in the corner. And there it was, the telltale sign that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't imagining this whole thing. A small, gold envelope rested on top of the desk. It wasn't the kind of envelope you'd expect to see in a hotel room. No, this one had a personal feel to it, like it was something meant for someone else, someone important. My hand reached for it before I even thought about it. The envelope slid easily out from under the pile of papers on the desk. My fingers trembled as I held it, feeling its weight, its significance. My name wasn't on it. But Emily's handwriting was. I took a breath and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The words were carefully written, in Emily's neat, graceful script. "I knew you would find this." I froze. That was all. I read the words again, trying to make sense of them. It was a message, but it was cryptic, like she was trying to tell me something without saying it directly. I felt like I was on the edge of some revelation, but it was slipping away, teasing me with its ambiguity. I shoved the note into my pocket and started searching the room more thoroughly. The small fridge in the corner caught my eye, and for a second, I considered checking it for any hidden clues. But my mind raced faster than my body could keep up. I was thinking too much, seeing too much, all of it blurring into a fog of confusion and anxiety. I wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't my life, not anymore. My relationship with Emily had always been straightforward, simple, calm, predictable. Until now. I thought I knew her better than anyone. But as I stood in that room, surrounded by unanswered questions, I realized that I didn't know the half of it. I ran my fingers through my hair. What the hell was going on? What had she been doing here? I didn't have time to answer that question. Another voice interrupted my thoughts. It wasn't Emily's voice, but someone else's. A man's voice. It was muffled at first, like the walls were closing in around me. But then it got clearer, closer. "Everything okay?" the voice asked. I froze, my body going stiff with fear. My instincts kicked in, and I darted toward the door, pressing myself against the wall as if I could disappear into it. I couldn't breathe. The voice belonged to someone outside the door, someone who wasn't Emily. I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps growing nearer, and my pulse surged with a fresh wave of panic. Who was this? What was going on? My mind spiraled again. What if this was exactly what I feared? What if I was about to catch her in a lie? I pressed my back harder against the wall, trying to silence my breathing. I couldn't make any noise. Not yet. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, waiting. But the moment seemed to stretch on forever. And then, the door handle rattled. I barely had time to react before the door opened, revealing the last person I expected to see. It wasn't Emily standing there. It was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, dressed in a black jacket, his face scruffy with a few days' worth of stubble. His eyes darted into the room, a slight frown on his face. He looked confused, like he didn't expect anyone to be here. "Hello?" he asked again, more uncertain this time. His gaze landed on the empty space beside the bed. "Emily?" My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. He was looking for her. Why? What the hell was going on? I swallowed, and the room felt smaller, more suffocating. I had a decision to make. I could walk up to him and demand answers, confront this stranger. I could fight for the truth I wasn't sure I even wanted anymore. Or I could slip away, take my confusion with me, and pretend that nothing had happened. I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't leave without answers. I stepped out from the shadows. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The man turned, startled, his eyes wide. He looked at me, then glanced back toward the door as if debating whether to run or stay. But he didn't have to. The hesitation only lasted a moment. He straightened up, and then his gaze met mine, unflinching. "Who are you?" he asked in return, his voice low but firm. "Why are you here?" I wanted to answer, to tell him everything that had been racing through my mind. But nothing seemed to come out. I just stared at him, trying to piece together the fragments of this strange, tangled puzzle. "I'm her husband," I finally said, the words coming out heavier than I expected. His eyes flickered to something behind me, but his expression didn't change. His jaw tightened, and for a long moment, neither of us moved. And then, he finally spoke again, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. "Not anymore." The words hit me like a cold slap, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not anymore. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, like he knew something I didn't, like he'd been waiting for me to show up all along. My stomach churned as the room seemed to close in around me. My hand trembled, and I gripped the edge of the desk for support, trying to steady myself. I hadn't come here looking for a fight, but now, it felt inevitable. The man didn't move. He just stood there, watching me, waiting for something I couldn't give him. I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Why was I even here? I should have just turned around and walked away. But I couldn't. The question that had been gnawing at me ever since I saw that Amazon receipt, what was Emily hiding? It had grown into something bigger, something more dangerous. "I'm her husband," I repeated, my voice stronger this time, though it still felt like I was speaking through a fog. The man looked me up and down, as if evaluating whether I was really telling the truth. His eyes lingered on my face for a long time, like he was studying every inch of me, maybe even deciding if I was worth the effort to explain things to. "You think I don't know that?" he finally said, his voice low but not without a hint of mockery. "She told me about you." My mind spun. She told him about me? "You're the one she left behind, right?" He tilted his head, clearly enjoying the discomfort that was rolling off of me. He stepped closer, his boots making a soft thud against the floor as he came to stand in front of me. I couldn't bring myself to move. It felt like my feet were stuck in cement. I swallowed, trying to clear the knot that had formed in my throat. "What the hell is this? Why are you here?" The man leaned in, his face inches from mine now. There was something in his eyes that made me feel both dangerous and vulnerable at the same time. He was taller than me, his frame broad and solid, but it wasn't just his physical presence that made me feel small. It was the power he had over the situation, over her. "She's been telling you stories, hasn't she?" he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I think it's time you knew the truth." I blinked, the words not quite registering. I wasn't ready for this. The truth? What truth? I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, he held up a hand to silence me. "I'm not your enemy," he said, his voice calm now, almost too calm. "But I'm not your friend either. I'm here because I want you to understand something. You think you've got it all figured out, but you don't. You never will." "Figured out what?" I demanded. "You think I don't know what's going on here? You think I didn't see the hotel reservation, the receipt? The damn dry cleaning with a suit that wasn't mine? Do you think I'm an idiot?" The man's lips curled into a small, knowing smile, but there was nothing warm about it. It was cold, calculating. "You really want to know what's going on?" he asked, his voice suddenly too quiet. You want to know why she's been buying stuff for a life she doesn't even have with you anymore? Then fine. I'll tell you. He stepped back, giving me space. The space between us felt vast, like he was about to reveal something that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I stood there, trembling, not just from the tension in the air, but because I wasn't sure if I even wanted to hear what was coming next. Emily's been living a double life, he said, his voice so calm it almost sounded rehearsed. She's been seeing me for months. And the only reason she's still with you is because she's too afraid to walk away. You're not stupid, are you? You've noticed the distance between you two. The lies. The cold nights. But I'm the one she's been coming to. I'm the one she's been really with. I felt like the floor had just dropped out beneath me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words, trying to find some thread of truth in them, but everything seemed like a blur. My hands were shaking, my pulse pounding in my ears. You're wrong, I finally managed to say, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't lie to me like that. The man scoffed, a sharp, bitter sound. You really think so? She's been keeping this from you, hiding it behind closed doors, and you've been so wrapped up in your own little world that you haven't seen it. Not once. She's been buying things for me, things she can't buy for you. Why do you think she keeps you around? I could feel the heat in my cheeks, the sting of anger building. It was a gut-wrenching feeling, but something in me refused to believe him. Emily wasn't like that. She couldn't be. But what if she was? The truth clawed at me, sharp and ugly. I couldn't let myself believe it. But the longer I stood there, listening to this man, the harder it became to deny the possibility. The nagging feeling in my stomach, she's hiding something, began to take root. You think she's only with you out of pity? The man asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She might have loved you once, but she doesn't now. She's with me, and she's been with me for a long time. This hotel room? This suit? They're all reminders of a life she wishes she could be living, but she's stuck with you because you don't know any better. I shook my head, feeling the walls closing in on me. No. You're wrong. You're the last person who can see it, he said, his tone suddenly softer. I can't help you. I can't fix it. But I'm telling you, for your own sake, stop lying to yourself. She's gone. The words hung in the air like smoke, curling around my thoughts. The man turned away then, walking back toward the door as if he'd said all he needed to say. You're wasting your time, he added, without turning back. But if you want to save yourself from more hurt, you should walk away. Now. Before it's too late. I didn't follow him out. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that the world I thought I understood, my life, my relationship, had just shattered, and I had no idea how to put it back together. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door he just walked through. His words hung in the air like smoke, curling into my lungs with every breath. She's gone. She's with him. I couldn't shake them off. Everything felt wrong. Every piece of this reality felt like it didn't belong, like someone had rewritten the script of my life and I was just a spectator watching everything unravel. My stomach twisted into knots, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't know who I was or what I was supposed to do next. I didn't know if I should leave. I didn't know if I should stay. But I had to do something. I couldn't walk away without answers. And I wasn't about to let some stranger tell me my wife didn't love me anymore. My feet moved before I could stop them. I didn't think about it, didn't plan it, but somehow, I was standing in front of the door to the bathroom, my hand already reaching for the knob. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe I thought there'd be a clue hidden behind the fogged-up mirror. Maybe there'd be a letter, or something that would tie everything together and make it make sense. But the bathroom was empty. Clean. Sterile, just like the rest of the room. I ran my fingers over the cold marble of the counter, my eyes darting to every corner of the room, hoping, praying for something, anything, that would explain what was happening. But nothing did. It was all a lie. I slammed the door shut and paced back into the main room. My mind was in chaos, my thoughts racing. The man's words replayed over and over. She's been seeing me for months. I couldn't breathe. The air felt too thick, too suffocating, and my chest felt like it was being crushed. I couldn't think straight. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not to Emily and me. I had to see her. I had to confront her, to get the truth from her mouth. This man, whoever he was, wasn't going to have the last word on this. I wasn't just going to take his word for it and let her go. If she was seeing someone else, if she was really done with me, I needed to hear it from her. I grabbed my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. The ringing tone felt like it was echoing through my entire body, a cruel reminder of everything I was about to lose. The call went to voicemail. Of course, I thought bitterly, shoving the phone back into my pocket. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my mind still spinning with everything I'd just learned. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this hotel room with all these unanswered questions hanging over me. The elevator ride down felt like it took forever. My mind was still racing, still unable to process the overwhelming wave of emotions crashing over me. She's been with him. The thought repeated over and over in my head like a chant. But there was another thought underneath it, one that was harder to swallow, harder to admit to myself. Why wasn't she with me anymore? I'd always thought Emily and I had something solid. Something real. Sure, there were ups and downs, but that's what relationships were. You worked through the hard times. You fought for each other. But maybe I'd missed the signs. Maybe I hadn't been paying attention. I'd been so focused on my own life, my own work, my own routine, that I hadn't noticed how far away we'd drifted. I hadn't seen the cracks that had formed between us, the distance that had grown like a silent wedge, pulling us further apart. I stepped out into the hotel lobby, blinking against the harsh lighting that seemed to highlight every detail. My eyes scanned the room, instinctively looking for her, though I knew she wouldn't be there. I didn't know why I was even hoping. I walked outside, the cool night air hitting my face, making me realize just how hot and claustrophobic the hotel room had been. My mind still felt foggy, my thoughts colliding with each other, like a dozen cars trying to race down a single-lane road. But there was one thought, a single, clear thought, that pierced through the noise. I needed to find Emily. I had to see her. She owed me that much. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone again, and checked my messages. There was nothing new from her. No texts. No calls. The last message she'd sent me was 2 days ago, "I'll be late. Don't wait up. Love you." The words felt like a slap now, cruel and hollow. It didn't sound like a message from a woman who was in love with her husband. It sounded like something she'd sent out of habit, like something she said without even thinking about it. I had to stop myself. I was spiraling. I needed to focus. I pulled up her contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. I was shaking. I was angry. I was scared. But I didn't care. She had to tell me the truth. Before I could press dial, my phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down, my heart skipping a beat as I saw her name on the screen. Emily. I hesitated. The air felt thick again, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I accepted the call, my voice tight, shaky, but determined. Emily? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak. And then, finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." My heart dropped. Sorry for what? I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want to hurt you. The words hung in the air, like they were too heavy for her to say. I felt my chest tighten. So she knew. She knew I was onto her. Emily, where are you? I asked, my voice rough. I can't explain it all right now, she said. But I need you to understand. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. It just did. I closed my eyes. I was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of not knowing the truth. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook now. Not after everything. Where are you? I asked again, more forcefully this time. She paused for a long time, and I could hear her shifting on the other end. She was somewhere I didn't recognize, somewhere unfamiliar. I'm at my parents' house, she finally said. I need time to think. To figure out what's next. Emily, I breathed out the word, my mind struggling to comprehend everything she was saying. You're telling me you're leaving me? Just like that. Another pause. This time, I could feel the weight of her words, her hesitation, like she wasn't sure how to say what she was about to say. I think it's over, she whispered. And just like that, everything shattered. The world around me seemed to tilt as those words landed. I think it's over. Her voice was so small, so fragile, like she was breaking, too. But nothing she said could undo the reality that hit me like a cold fist. I stood there in the dead of night, the world buzzing around me, my body numb. My own wife, the woman I'd spent years with, was telling me that it was over. And in that moment, I had no idea what came next. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For a long time, I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for something, anything, to make sense of what she had just said. I don't understand. My voice sounded foreign to me, hoarse and unsure. You're telling me it's over? Just like that? After everything? I could hear her take a shaky breath on the other end. It was like she was choking on her own words, like she was struggling to make sense of something that had already slipped through her fingers. It's not just like that. I didn't want it to be this way. But I've been feeling this way for a long time. My chest tightened. I felt the anger rise, bubbling up from somewhere deep within. How long? I demanded. How long has this been going on, Emily? I knew she wasn't going to give me a straight answer. I could already feel it, the same way she'd always dodged the tough questions, the things she didn't want to face. She had a way of shutting me out, even when I needed her the most. It had been happening for a while, but I was too blind to see it. I don't know, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I couldn't listen to this anymore. I didn't want to hear her explanations or excuses. I was done. I didn't know where to go from here, but I couldn't stand here anymore, feeling like I was being suffocated by her silence. I'm coming to see you, I said, more to myself than to her. I'm coming over there. We're going to talk about this face to face. I didn't wait for her response. I hung up before she could say anything else. It felt like a sharp, final move, but something inside me had snapped. I needed answers. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about the long drive ahead or the strange, heavy weight of the silence that had settled in my chest. I didn't care about the past or the promises I had made to myself about how we'd be okay. None of that mattered anymore. Emily had shattered that illusion, and now I was left with the jagged pieces of a life I couldn't put together. I stepped out into the street, feeling the cool night air bite into my skin. The world was quiet, too quiet, and the stars overhead were barely visible through the haze of city lights. I didn't look around. I didn't care. All I could think about was her face, her voice, and the way she sounded when she told me it was over. I didn't know what I expected to find when I got to her parents' house. Maybe I thought I'd show up and things would magically make sense, that I'd be able to pull the pieces of her life together and fix whatever had gone wrong. But deep down, I knew better. Nothing was ever that easy. I drove like a man possessed, my eyes focused on the road ahead, trying to block out the images of everything we'd shared, the good and the bad. I couldn't let myself think about that now. I couldn't let myself remember the way her hand felt in mine, the quiet moments we'd shared, the laughter that had once filled our home. What had gone wrong? What had changed? Was it the things I hadn't said? The things I hadn't done? The man she was with now, what did he offer that I couldn't? These thoughts chased each other like dark clouds in my mind, threatening to swallow me whole. But I pushed them down. I didn't have time for self-pity. I had to face her. I pulled up outside her parents' house. The lights were dim, and the front door was ajar, like someone was waiting for me to arrive. It was so ordinary, so deceptively calm, and yet everything felt wrong. I felt like an intruder, like I had no business being here. But I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't leave without getting the answers I so desperately needed. I grabbed my phone and texted her. I'm here. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for the familiar vibration, the ping that would signal she'd received it. But it didn't come. I tapped my foot impatiently, the seconds stretching into minutes. It was as if she was waiting for something, for me to give up, to just walk away. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The door opened a moment later, and I found myself staring at her mother's familiar face. She was surprised to see me, but not entirely shocked. She must have known I was coming. Maybe Emily had already prepared her for this moment. You're here, she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. I nodded, my mouth dry, my eyes darting around the room as I tried to get my bearings. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want to have this conversation. But there was no other way. Emily had left me no choice. Where is she? I asked, my voice rough. Her mother hesitated. She's upstairs, in her room. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I could feel my hands trembling, but I wasn't going to let her see that. I wasn't going to let anyone see how broken I felt. Thank you, I said quietly, turning toward the stairs. Each step felt like a lifetime. I knew that when I reached the top, when I opened the door to her room, everything would change. Nothing would ever be the same. And I wasn't ready for it. I knocked once, twice, and then I pushed the door open. Emily was standing by the window, looking out into the night, her back to me. She didn't turn around. She didn't even acknowledge that I was there. For a moment, everything felt still. The world outside seemed to fade away, and it was just the two of us, two people who had once promised to never let go of each other, now standing on opposite sides of a chasm we couldn't bridge. "Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her eyes red, puffy from crying. But there was something else in them, something I couldn't place. Something that told me she was already gone. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaking now. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" She took a shaky breath, her eyes flicking to the floor before meeting mine. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said softly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to let go." I felt the weight of her words settle over me like a lead blanket. Let go. She had already let go. "I didn't want to lose you," I said, my voice breaking. "But you already have." And in that moment, I knew it was over. There was no going back. There was no fixing this. We were two people who had once been in love, now standing on the edge of something neither of us could control. And I didn't know if I would ever find my way back.